You know, some people say they'd do anything to be a Hollywood star, but nobody's more about that life than our girls Pearl and Maxine. For them, it's a cutthroat business. Literally. So when these two delusional divas finally cross paths, the only way to settle who really deserves the spotlight is with a battle to the death. In this extra special marathon episode, we'll see a farm girl turn into a slasher villain, a brutal showdown between two freaky-ass old people, and a group of low-budget mattress actors, and a wild rampage through LA that turns the Hollywood Hills into a bloodbath. So we're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the insane movie stars in the X trilogy. This farm is about to turn into a slaughterhouse. It all starts one sunny morning at a peaceful little farmhouse somewhere in Texas. That's where we meet Pearl, a humble farm girl who dreams of becoming a Hollywood star. It's the year 1918, and while her husband Howard's been fighting in the war, she's been stuck here with her disapproving mother, Ruth, who won't let Pearl do anything besides take care of the farm and her paralyzed father. Disappointed with how her life has turned out, she gets started on her chores while putting on a show for all of her barnyard friends, but everything changes when little Mr. Goose here waddles in at the wrong time. All of a sudden, Pearl's expression goes totally blank because there's one tiny detail that I forgot to mention. She's completely out of her mind. And after turning poor Mr. Goose into a shish kebab with her pitchfork, she takes his body over to the swamp and feeds her to her pet gator Theta, making one down with 4 more to go. Okay, well, I guess you can say that this goose is cooked. Now, Pearl here is in her early 20s, but seems weirdly immature for her age, and spends most of her time daydreaming about becoming a movie star when she should be worried about not dying from the flu. You see, in 1918, when the story takes place, the entire country was dealing with a deadly flu epidemic that would end up killing millions of people all around the world. Just like in 2020, families self-isolated to stop the spread, and that's why Pearl never interacts with anyone besides her mom and her dad. You know, total isolation and the constant disapproval from her parents seems like it caused her to grow up emotionally stunted. And now she lives in a bubble where her dreams of becoming famous are her only real way to cope. Needless to say, keeping all this repressed isn't good for her head, but she crossed the line when she decided to take her feelings out on Mr. Goose. At her age, Pearl should be well aware that what she did was wrong, but she shows, no signs of empathy or remorse for what she's done. The worst part is, this isn't even her first time. And in modern psychology, cruelty to animals is treated as one of the biggest red flags for serial killer-like type behaviors in real life. A qualified psychiatrist might diagnose her with some kind of severe personality disorder, but that's the problem. In 1918, there was no mental health system like we have today, and if she was truly open with anyone about what she's been up to, then she would end up in one of those overcrowded state asylums, which in her case, honestly, might be for the best. Now later we find out that Pearl's mom knows more about her secret life than she lets on, so before this gets too far, she could try keeping Pearl under more strict supervision or getting whatever help they can from a local doctor. But at this point, it looks like we're already way past that, so the best thing is to just let the sheriff pick her up and take her to the state hospital, because at least then Mr. Goose will get the justice he deserves. That night, while Pearl's supposed to be helping her father wash up, she decides to hop in the tub and start practicing her kicks, flinging water all over the place until her mother says to cut it out. She's going into town tomorrow for some more medicine, but secretly plans to stop by the movies before heading home, knowing that her mother would be absolutely furious if she found out. In the morning, she hops on her bike and heads into town, where everyone's masked up because of the deadly flu outbreak that's been spreading all over the country. After grabbing what she needs from the store, she heads across the street and goes into the movie theater, where she watches with childish excitement as the dancers prance around on the screen. After the show, she bumps into the theater's projectionist, who chats her up about her dreams of becoming a professional dancer. Before she leaves, he goes inside and brings Pearl one of the frames from her favorite show, inviting her to come back anytime for a backstage tour. At dinner, Pearl's mother calls her out over the missing change and says that she needs to be more responsible instead of only thinking about herself. Frustrated, Pearl goes up to her room and prays for a chance to finally make some of her dreams come true. But while she's asleep, a comet passes by her window, and pretty soon her life is about to change forever. The next morning, Pearl is out milking the cow when a big fancy car pulls into the driveway. It's Howard's family stopping by to drop off a roasted pig, and her sister-in-law Misty tells her about a dance audition that's happening over the weekend. This could be her big break, so the girls agree to go for it together, but they have to make sure that their mothers do not find out. Alright, this could be Pearl's only chance to finally get out of this town. And for the sake of everyone within bike riding distance, we need to make sure that she gets the part. So the first thing she'd want to do is gather as much information as possible about who's judging, who else is competing, and what kinds of routines that they're looking for. I mean, since it's 1918, she doesn't even have Google or a phone to work with, but what she does have is the mailman. Back in the day, the mailman was the most well-respected, well-informed guy around, so if the church had been sending out any announcements, flyers, or invitations, he would know about it. To get ready, she's going to want to practice a short routine using what she's seen in the movies as inspiration. She also needs to make sure she's wearing something eye-catching, but respectable, because this is a Christmas tour after all, so it's better to keep it PG and leave that freaky stuff back at the cornfield. Now, that's if she was playing by the rules, but we all know that Pearl here isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. And if she really wants to stack the odds in her favor, she needs to make sure that her opponents don't show up. So here's the plan. Using the intel that she gets from the mailman, she can find out what other girls are planning on competing. Then she could write out a bunch of letters claiming the auditions were canceled because of the flu and drop them off at each of the girls' houses on Friday night. That alone should be enough to thin out the competition, but if she wants to be extra sure, she can leave some kind of baked goods with laxatives or some kind of weird digestive syrup along with that letter. Then her ops will probably eat them thinking it's just a gift from the organizers and they won't be going anywhere if they're all spending all day in the bathroom. But really, to seal the deal, Pearl needs someone to fail miserably right before she goes up so that she looks better by comparison. And unfortunately, it's gotta be Misty who takes the fall. So right before she's about to go up on stage, Pearl should give her a sip of some homemade tea mixed with laxatives to help with her nerves. And then after she her pants in the middle of the audition, Pearl should be looking at an easy dub. Later on that day, Pearl sneaks up to her mother's room and borrows one of her fancy dresses without permission. Then, after waiting until her parents are both asleep, she sneaks outside and rides back into town. Going straight back to the theater, she hesitantly knocks on the projectionist's door, and sure enough, he's more than happy to invite her inside. Offering to put on a movie, he takes one down and loads it onto the projector, but as Pearl starts to watch, she realizes that it's actually a dirty film, and he explains that these types of movies are about to become the next big thing. The next day, Pearl takes her father and pushes him out of the house, but she has no idea that her mother is watching through the window. Taking him down to the dock, she starts calling for her pet gator as she rolls him in closer and closer to the edge. But her mother shows up just in time and stops her before she does anything crazy. Later on that night, a huge storm rolls in while the family's having dinner. It starts off quiet at first until Pearl's mother reveals that she found the booklet from her daughter's trip to the movies. Frustrated, Pearl decides that she's not gonna take it anymore and tells her mother that she's going to the dance audition whether she approves of it or not. And sure enough, it quickly blows up into a huge fight, with Pearl's mother asking why she's never satisfied with the life that they've worked so hard to provide. Begging her, Pearl swears that she'll never ask again if she's allowed to at least try. But everything changes when her mother reveals that she knows about her daughter's dark side. She pretends like she doesn't know what she's talking about, but the woman gets so furious that she finally hauls off and smacks her across the face, which is when Pearl finally snaps and decides to slap her mother back just as hard. But as they start fighting, the woman's dress suddenly catches on fire. Panicking, Pearl grabs a pot full of boiling water and uses it to put out the flames, but the damage has kind of already been done here, and instead of calling for help, she just drags her unconscious body into the basement and leaves her at the bottom of the stairs. Now overwhelmed, she runs all the way back to town and ends up spending the night with the projectionist, but her rampage of destruction is only just getting started. Alright, it's spooky season, y'all, and you know what's scarier than your scary movie? Not talking about your mental health. Now, I don't know if you know this, but I've been working in media for years, and this industry can be kind of stressful. For the longest time, I thought the best way to deal with the stress was bottling it up, and boy was I wrong. Thankfully, my homie recommended today's sponsor, BetterHelp, and it was a total game changer. The thing about BetterHelp is a therapist is going to listen, ask questions, and help you see things from new perspectives. They can give you advice and techniques to make positive changes in your life about burnout or any other struggles that you might be having. BetterHelp is definitely on a mission to make starting therapy easier, but let me tell you how easy it is. To get started, all you have to do is fill out a simple questionnaire, and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. If it's not the right match, then you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. And with over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. So to get started, click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/howtobeatyt and get 10% off your first month of therapy. I really hope you guys can check it out. And now, back to the show. Okay, well, they say the brightest stars burn out the fastest, and if that's true, then Pearl's mother here should be in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Yeah, but instead, she's rotting in the basement with third-degree burns while her daughter's busy hooking up with some sleazy projectionist who has no idea what he's gotten himself into. And you know what else all these guys have in common? Everyone here has officially up. Now, I think we can all agree that Ruth didn't really deserve what happened to her, but everything she did leading up to the point did not exactly help. Like, did you seriously know that Pearl was out here feeding animals to the gators and you did nothing to stop it? That's a problem you need to address before she goes from pitchforking geese to a straight-up slasher villain. And after catching her getting ready to do the same thing to your husband, yeah, that's when it should have been time to send Pearl off to Arkham Asylum. But instead, you just kept on throwing more fuel on the psycho fire until it all crashed and burned in more ways than one. Pearl isn't exactly setting herself up for success here either. It's going to be pretty hard to start your Hollywood career once anyone finds out about this little family dispute. And for someone who's gotten pretty good at fooling others, you completely missed the fact that this projectionist has been playing you like a fiddle. But out of everyone, this dude messed up the worst, because if he thinks that he's just having some fling with a random farm girl, then he's in for a pretty big surprise. And you can trust me when I say that he's about to get what's coming to him. But until then, it looks like everybody else just f***ed up. In the morning, Pearl wakes up surprised to find herself in the man's bed and immediately starts rushing to put on her clothes. It's not because she feels guilty or anything, it's because she needs to start getting ready for the big audition. So the projectionist offers to give her a ride home, but that was his biggest mistake. When they arrive at the house, she asks him to wait outside while she goes in to get the place cleaned up. He starts to wonder what the hell is taking so long, but she finally calls him in and awkwardly introduces him to her father before hustling him upstairs for another makeout session. By now, he's starting to realize that something strange is going on here. And that's when he hears a knocking sound coming from somewhere downstairs. It gets to the point where he can't ignore it any longer, and when he goes down to check it out, he's alarmed to find a bunch of rotten food lying all over the floor. Playing it off, she blames the mess on the family dog and rushes him out to the barn, where she tries to distract him by telling him all about the other animals. Suspicious, he asks about the dog, but Pearl's already forgotten what she said and accidentally gives away that she's been lying the entire time. As the man starts trying to get the f*** up out of there, she realizes that he's seen through her act and was never actually serious about anything he said. Furious, she starts demanding to know what she did wrong, but when he tries getting back into his car and driving away, before he even knows what the hell is going on, he turns around to see Pearl standing right next to the car, and she plunges the pitchfork straight into his chest in a fit of rage. He slumps against the wheel and the car starts idling forward, but Pearl quickly catches up and drags him out before piercing him straight through the mouth. And that makes 2 down with 3 more to go. After getting washed up and putting on one of her mother's dresses, she goes back downstairs and shows her father the outfit. Kissing him goodbye, she takes off a pillowcase and holds it over his mouth, deciding to kill him so she won't have to leave him behind. This now makes 3 down with 2 more to go. Before leaving, she drives the projectionist's car into the lake and waves farewell as the gator comes to eat his body, but now it's off to the church for the biggest audition of her life. Okay, after realizing that she was absolutely off her rocker, the projectionist here made the right call by deciding to get the f*** up out of there. But these older cars weren't exactly made for fast escapes. Even though he had an eclectic start, which was actually rare for the time, it would still take somewhere between 15 to 30 seconds of adjusting old-timey contraptions before this rig would actually get going. And that's just to start the engine. But even if he floored it, Pearl could easily keep up with him for a few dozen yards at the speed of a brisk walk. So yeah, driving away, not looking too good for him. And when she popped up next to his car, he only had a split second to decide how he was going to react. He was already getting the vibe that she could be dangerous, so before she got the chance to pitchfork him, his best option would have been to bail out over the passenger side and use the car itself as cover. Now, since Pearl was armed and he was not, that means that escaping comes first, so he'd want to either run for the cornfields and hide or get over to the nearest house and ask for help. But if she had caught up, his only option would have been to fight back, and since her pitchfork is deadliest at mid-range, he'd want to dodge her first attack and then use the opportunity to get in close where he'd have the best chance to overpower her and win the battle. When she finally makes it to the audition, Misty starts getting cold feet and decides to let Pearl go first instead. Entering the church, she takes the stage in front of the judges and dances harder than she's ever danced before, and when it's all over, she's devastated to hear that she didn't get the part. A little while later, Misty finds Pearl still crying her eyes out behind the church and offers to give her a ride home. Back at the farm, she tries to play it off like the audition was no big deal, but Pearl obviously sees things a little differently. Opening up, she confesses that she feels sick, but not in the coughing and fever type of way. It's more like the feeling that she's different from other people, but she's never told anyone about it until now. Trying to help, Misty offers to let Pearl practice on her as if she was Howard, but she has no idea the can of worms that she's about to open up. All of a sudden, Pearl just starts spewing all of this deeply personal information with absolutely no filter, telling her everything that happened with the projectionist, and even admitting to killing her own parents. I mean, it's possibly the most incriminating trauma dump of all time, and when she's finally done revealing everything, she realizes that she's just confessed all of this to her husband's sister. Shocked, Misty just sits there speechless until she finally gets up and says that she needs to get going. Just then, Pearl starts implying that she knows Misty got the part, and although she tries to pretend like she didn't, she eventually admits that it's true. Before she leaves, Pearl makes her promise not to tell anyone about their conversation, but as Misty's walking away from the house, she comes out behind her and picks up an axe. This is when Misty starts running down the road with Pearl stomping after her, but she doesn't even get that far before she trips and falls in the mud. Picking up the pace, Pearl closes the distance and slashes her 3 times across the back, chasing her all the way out to the gate before she finally collapses. Falling to the ground, Misty begs her to stop, but Pearl takes the axe and brings it straight down onto her face, making 4 down with 1 more to go. Alright, well, on the bright side, I guess this means that there's an opening in the dance group. Now, Misty here gave herself enough of a head start that she should have been home free, but even though she was carrying a heavy axe, Pearl absolutely smoked her in the chase, and it all came down to their choice of footwear. Now, after just coming back from the big audition, Misty was wearing a pair of pumps with a 2 or 2.5 inch heel. Stylish, classy, and modern, but they've got no grip, terrible ankle support, and they make it hard for you to keep your balance, okay? Okay. Now, as for Pearl, she had on a pair of lace-up boots with a much lower and wider heel. Rustic, functional, and not as flashy, but with none of the drawbacks of Misty's pumps. So even though her heels might have impressed the judges, keeping them on during the chase was like putting swim flippers on a gazelle and expecting it to outrun a cheetah, and it was the last fashion mistake that she would ever make. If she wanted to survive, the first thing that she'd have wanted to do was take off those heels and run for the grass, where Pearl's boots might actually cause her to slip or slow down on the softer ground. And then she would have had to juke out her first swing, hit her with a body check to knock her off balance, run to her bike while she's getting back to her feet, and get the hell up out of there before she got caught up. But now it looks like Misty's gator food and Pearl's psychotic secret is still safe. So after killing her own sister-in-law in cold blood, Pearl goes back to the basement where she finds her mother's body still lying at the bottom of the steps. It looks like she's finally died from her injuries, but Pearl cuddles up next to her corpse and imagines that she's singing one of her old nursery rhymes. As for Misty, Pearl chops up her body and feeds it to her pet gator before going back inside and bringing her parents' bodies over to the dinner table as if they were still alive. Now, sometime later, Howard finally returns home from the war only to find the decomposing bodies still propped up at the table, but Pearl comes to greet him as if there's nothing wrong. and welcomes him home with a big, creepy smile that she holds until it looks like she's about to explode. In the end, that makes 5 victims down with 2 survivors, but 60 years later, they'll finally run into somebody who gives our delusional queen a serious run for her money. Pearl, lover, hater, an absolute icon, and very dear to my heart. Mia Goth could kill me any day, straight up, and I would just sit back and wait for it to happen. Now, we didn't really cover Pearl when it first came out because, I mean, you know, hey, but stay tuned because we've got X and Maxine coming up right next. If you were trapped in the middle of nowhere with a crazy old lady trying to hunt you down, what would you do? These up-and-coming mattress actresses wanted a quiet spot to shoot their next spicy home video, but ended up starring in their very own slasher film instead. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the insane senior citizens in X. This woman is about to have the worst night of her career. One day in 1979 at a gentleman's club outside of Houston, Texas, this young woman Maxine is powdering her nose with illegal substances in the dressing room when her boyfriend/manager Wayne comes in and tells her that it's time to go. After gassing herself up in the mirror, she grabs her things and joins the rest of the group out in the van. They're heading out into the countryside to film an adult movie, but they have no idea that it's going to be the last trip that they'll ever take. On their way out of town, they pass around copies of the script for their shoot, saying how excited they are to make something without having to go through Hollywood, and talking about what they'll do with the money after they finally get their big break. The group pulls up at a small gas station out along the highway, and Wayne and Maxine head in for some groceries while the others wait for them inside the van. Maxine here tells her man that she's eager to get started, complaining that she's tired of struggling to get by, and is ready to live the life of fame and luxury that she thinks that she deserves. To help out with production, Wayne decided to hire this amateur filmmaker RJ and his girlfriend Lorraine, but Maxine makes it clear that she doesn't like the girl, saying that she's too quiet and is always staring at them. Meanwhile, outside, her friend and fellow actress Bobby Lynn gives RJ some advice on how to make the shot more aggressive, while he explains the editing process and records some footage of this guy Jackson pumping their gas. After grabbing their things, Wayne and Maxine join the others out in the van and they get back on the road. Later that afternoon, they come across the scene of an accident where a massive truck has crashed into a cow that was crossing the street. An officer waves them by, and they drive through its splattered guts right past the sheriff, who's going to be recovering their bodies just 24 hours later. The crew finally arrives at their destination, an isolated farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road, just as the sun starts to set, and Wayne tells the others to wait for him in the van while he checks in with the owner. Ready to get down to business, Bobby Lynn and Jackson immediately start aggressively making out. Feeling uncomfortable, Lorraine looks at her boyfriend and says that this isn't what she had in mind when she agreed to help them out, but he insists that they're going to make art and tells her to just give it a chance. Wayne steps across the front porch and knocks on the door, but the owner, an old man named Howard, doesn't recognize him at first, grabbing his shotgun and threatening to shoot him if he doesn't get off of the property. Seeing the confrontation, Maxine reaches for a revolver that they keep in the glove box, but Wayne reassures the man that he's not from the local government and they're only looking for a place to spend the night. After a moment, Howard finally remembers who he is, lowering his weapon and saying that it was never even loaded, just a trick that he uses to scare off unwanted visitors. With tensions smoothed out for now, Wayne and the others start unloading the van, but that's when Maxine notices the old-timer's creepy wife, Pearl, watching her from a second-floor window, taking their things. The group follows Howard across the field to the rundown shack where they'll be staying. Before they can make it very far, Howard stops to catch his breath, clearly having some trouble breathing, but when Wayne tries to offer him a hand, the old man abruptly brushes him off. Inside, Howard explains that the place was once used as a house for soldiers during the Civil War, and Jackson mentions that he served 2 tours as a Marine in Vietnam. As they're settling in, Wayne catches him not so subtly eyeing up Maxine, and the old man says that he never mentioned bringing all of these others along. Wayne offers him some extra cash to pay him off, but Howard pockets the money and says that he doesn't like the look of any of them, warning them that his wife is back at the house and saying that they all better behave themselves before he goes. Okay, I know these wannabe movie stars are probably just eager to get started on the artistic achievement of their lifetimes, but the amount of red flags that they're overlooking here is pretty unbelievable. They might be determined to get famous no matter what the costs, But if they're not careful, they're going to end up with their faces printed in the newspapers and on the back of milk cartons, instead of lighting up the big silver screen. Anybody with even a little bit of common sense would be hopping straight back in the van and getting the hell out of there before it's too late. So let's take a minute to point out some of the warning signs, just in case some of you ever find yourself in a similar scenario. The crew here was too busy grabbing beers and junk food to catch on, but the truth is that the trouble started long before they ever got to the old man's house. Horror fans know that if you're ever on your way to an isolated farmhouse out in the country and happen to stop in at a local gas station, then you're gonna want to take a good look at your surroundings. And keep an eye out for anything suspicious, because that's probably going to be your last chance to cancel the trip before everything starts to go horribly wrong. Sure enough, this gas station is hiding exactly the kind of red flags that we've all come to expect after studying up on slasher movies. Now, if you look closely, then you'll notice that tacked up on the board behind the counter are not one and not two, but at least 4 missing person reports from the local area. Something to worry about? You betcha. And that's only the people who've been reported missing. Who knows how many lonely hitchhikers might have gotten picked up by an unassuming truck out on the side of the highway, only to never be seen or heard from again. The only thing that this place needed was a grizzled old attendant who asks them what they're doing out around these parts and warns them that city folks tend to go missing up that there road. I'd still stop in to fill my tank, but only so I'd have enough gas to get me home, after I turned around and headed back in the opposite direction. And then we get to the house. Here's a test. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a rundown old farmhouse out in the country somewhere in Texas? If you answered Chainsaw Massacre, then congratulations. You're smarter than these 6 future meat hook decorations over here. As young adults here in the late 70s, there's absolutely no way that at least one of them hasn't seen old Leatherface getting down to business, especially since RJ is an amateur director. I get that real life isn't a horror movie, at least most of the time anyway, but the ideas for these stories have to come from somewhere, so it's important to use the lessons that they try to teach you to make some smarter decisions than the crew here. That way, someone won't end up making a movie based on what happened to you. So the place looks bad enough on its own, and then out comes Grandpa wielding a shotgun at the first sign of any visitors. Not exactly what you'd call a warm welcome. Besides the fact that he didn't even remember who Wayne was at first, even though they'd just spoken over the phone the other day, he also seems very hostile towards anyone who he thinks might be from the country. What's up with that? Have county officials been coming out here lately to look for someone like maybe one of those missing people from the board back at the gas station? Call me paranoid, but I'd bet that he's got the body of some poor unfortunate hippie hung up somewhere in there right now. And I, for one, would not be sticking around to find out. As soon as he lowered that shotgun, I'd say that I was going to the van to get my things before jumping in the driver's seat and kicking up dust as I peeled out of there as fast as it would take me. But if people are disappearing out here more often than the Bermuda Triangle, and paranoid old weirdos packing major heat aren't enough to scare them away, then I guess that creepy old lady watching them from the bedroom window isn't going to do that either. I mean, she's probably harmless, right? Might even bake them some cookies if they stick around. Sure thing, guys. Good luck with that. Now, this old man made it pretty clear that they aren't welcome guests from the start, and personally, I'd be packing my things and turning back without a second thought, but if these delinquents are really determined to spend the night, then it's definitely time to get prepared in case he tries anything funny. First things first, they need to get Wayne's revolver out of the glove box and make sure that it's locked and loaded. A gun won't do you any good if it's empty and out in the car, and they need to be ready to fight for their lives if things start going bump in the night. They could also pull the van closer to the cabin that they're staying in. That way they'll be able to keep an eye on it and have the option to make a quick getaway if they need to. Also, the old man leaving actually provides them with a great opportunity to sneak around the property and search for anything suspicious. They'd have to be careful that Granny up there didn't catch on to what they were doing and sound the alarm, but the chance to peek in the basement windows and have a look in the sheds while the old geezer's away is just too good to pass up. Even if they don't outright see a dead body, some bloody farm tools, rope, or anything else that looked suspicious would be all that I needed to see before I decided to hit the road. It's common knowledge that there's there's safety in numbers, so whatever they decide to do next, the most important thing would be to never separate from the group. That way, you'd have friends to back you up and a wide selection of meat shields if the worst case scenario came true. If any trouble starts, then at least they have these old farts outnumbered 3-1. So it shouldn't be much of a fight, especially knowing that Jackson here managed to survive 2 tours in Vietnam. Personally, my advice here is to just shoot what they came to shoot and get out of there before he gets back, since I'd rather sleep in the van on the side of the road than spend the night at this place waiting to get killed. But the good news is that these whippersnappers are too young and pretty to die, or at least that's what they think. Let's see what happens when that's put to the test. As soon as he's gone, the rest of the group makes it clear that they didn't like the old man's attitude. Lorraine asks if he even knows what they came out here to do, but Wayne says that he doesn't, because he thinks that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Peeking through the window, he watches as the old man gets in his truck and leaves the property, and tells the others that it's time to get down to business now that the coast is clear. While the others are busy shooting their first scene, Maxine here goes out for some fresh air and a cigarette. Walking alone through the brush, she eventually makes her way to a dock down by the lake, and decides that it looks like the perfect place for some skinny dipping, never noticing the old woman stalking her from behind the trees. The thing is, this creepy grandma isn't the only predator out there either, and while Maxine floats around without a care in the world, a massive alligator starts watching her from across the water. Swimming back towards the dock, she still has no idea that the gator is closing in right behind her, pulling herself up just in time without ever knowing just how close she came to getting chomped. On her way back to the shack, Maxine notices the old lady watching her from the front porch, and she motions for her to come over before turning and walking inside. Pulling open the screen door, she calls out to the woman, but by now, she's nowhere in sight. Still, the girl cautiously walks inside and into the kitchen, where she notices that the place is full of dirty dishes and bad vibes. Just then, the old woman reappears in the doorway behind her, offering her a glass of homemade lemonade. Not wanting to offend her, Maxine takes a seat at the table and chugs down the whole glass, saying that she should get back to the others before anyone starts to get worried. As they're walking towards the front door, Pearl stops to admire some pictures of her and Howard on their wedding day, reminiscing about the days when she was also young and beautiful. In the past, she'd been a dancer, but Howard had to leave her to serve in both world wars, while she stayed home and looked after herself. Before they knew it, the days of their youth had passed them by, and they'd both grown old and sick. Standing between her and the door, Pearl tells Maxine to look at herself in the mirror, and while she's distracted, the old woman reaches out and lightly touches her side. Maxine immediately gets uncomfortable, but before she has time to confront her, Howard pulls up in his truck, and Pearl tells her that she needs to leave. Sneaking out through a side door, Maxine watches as the man carries some groceries inside, and she makes a break for the others as soon as he's out of sight. Looking over her shoulder as she runs, she ends up crashing right into Wayne, who shouts at her that it's time for her scene. Maxine here is still shaken by the whole experience, but after shutting herself in a bedroom to gather her thoughts and indulge in some more illegal substances, she manages to compose herself enough to get back to work. Meanwhile, back at the house, Howard carries some groceries into the pantry and notices the 2 lemonade glasses sitting on the kitchen table. Upstairs, Pearl is sitting in front of the mirror, brushing out her thin strands of hair and putting on blue makeup that looks exactly like Maxine's. The crew sneaks into the barn to film their next scene, but they have no idea that the whole time that they're recording, the creepy old woman is watching them through the window. Once they're finished, Pearl heads back to her house and starts trying to get romantic with her husband, but he pushes her off, saying that he can't do anything too strenuous because of his heart condition, leaving her there feeling alone, undesirable, and jealous of the other girl's youthful good looks. Later that night, the crew gathers around in the front room for some sandwiches and beers, when Maxine catches Lorraine staring at her and Wayne. She wants to know if they think it's strange for Maxine to be sleeping with other men when the 2 of them are supposed to be a couple, and they respond that as long as the camera's on, then it's just business. business, like acting in a movie. Confused, Lorraine asks them how they can love each other and still be with others. And this time, it's Bobby Lynn who explains that they just want to enjoy themselves while they're young and happy, and life's too short to spend it following outdated traditions. Celebrating their hard day's work, they raise a toast to the perverts of the world for paying their bills. Jackson plays them a song on his guitar, while back at the house, Pearl takes off her makeup and lays down in bed alone. Just then, Lorraine announces that she wants to do a scene in the movie, which shocks everyone in the room, and most of all her boyfriend RJ. He immediately shuts it down, asking the others if they put her up to this, but she insists that it's what she wants. RJ here is furious, but Wayne takes him outside and argues that he knows from experience that if she's serious, then she'll do it whether he wants her to or not. He can try to stop her, but if he does, it'll only spiral further out of control. RJ insists that she's not like other women, saying that she's a nice girl, but Wayne tells him that, in his opinion, there's no such thing, before walking back inside. Outnumbered 5-1, RJ swallows his pride, grabs his recording equipment, and helps them film the scene. Late that night, while everyone's asleep, RJ gets up and takes a shower, crying to himself and unable to get his mind off of what's just happened, until eventually he decides that he's done with the whole production. Storming out of the house, he grabs the keys to the van and starts it up, ready to leave them all behind. But as he's driving away, he nearly runs over the old woman, who's standing there in the darkness in the middle of the road. Stopping the van, RJ gets out to see if she needs some help, but that was his biggest mistake. Without saying a word, the woman leans forward and pulls him in for a hug, rubbing his back and trying to kiss him. Horrified and disgusted, RJ pulls away and says that they should go find her husband so that she doesn't get hurt out here all alone. Suddenly, the woman stabs him in the throat with a kitchen knife, causing him to stumble back in shock and fall to the ground, where he starts bleeding out in the dirt. Climbing on top of him, she pulls the knife out of his neck and stabs him over and over again, shredding open his neck and covering the front of the van with splatters of blood. That makes one victim down, with 5 more to go. When she's finally finished, the woman slowly picks herself up and dances over his body, like she used to back in the good old days, before grabbing the keys to the van and going off in search of her next victim. Whew, okay, talk about a rough night. RJ might have been the amateur director on the set, but it looks like Granny Pearl's the one making the cuts this time around. So what would you do in this scenario? You're an amateur director looking to make your first big hit, but the shoot of a lifetime quickly turned into the setup for a real-life slasher film. Late that night, you decide to hit the road before people start getting shanked. Smart move. But as you're pulling out of the driveway, you run into this old geezer who looks like she's cosplaying as the Crypt Keeper, blocking your exit. Ruh-roh, we got trouble. My advice, drive right around her, hit the gas, and don't look back. Whatever you do, don't get out to help like RJ here, because remember, you're running for your life, not running a retirement home. She might not seem dangerous at first, but this old lady is out for blood, and honestly, everyone would be better off if you turned her into a prehistoric speed bump before she even had the chance to do any real damage. Unfortunately, RJ walked right into her trap and ended up as the first victim. But what's even worse is that he won't be the last. So the obvious thing that RJ should have done here was to stay in the van and keep on driving. But if he was really that determined to play the Good Samaritan, it might have helped to at least make sure that he wasn't heading straight into an ambush. If he was paying close enough attention, then he would have noticed that Pearl was clearly hiding something behind her back when he first pulled up. In situations like this where you're alone on a creepy old farm in the middle of the night, the safest way to approach any situation is to assume that everyone is out to get you, especially old ladies who don't even look like they know where they are in the first place. It's time to think like a police officer and check her for any sharp objects right away, and never let her get too close until you're sure that she's not a threat. If RJ had given her a thorough ocular pat down before going in to lend a helping hand, then he might have caught on to her trick before he caught a knife in his neck. As soon as he realized what was happening, the next step would have been to retreat back to the safety of the van. And if she attacks, then grab onto the hand where she's holding the knife, disarm her, punch her lights out with a swift uppercut, and get the hell out of there before Old Man Jenkins comes out waving the boomstick. I mean, she's practically a walking fossil after all, so if he somehow managed to get taken out by Pearl without even putting up a fight, then he probably wouldn't have lasted very long once things started to pop off anyway. So maybe maybe this was for the best. Sorry, RJ. Pick better friends next time. Back at the cabin, Lorraine rolls over in bed and notices that RJ isn't there. Worried, she goes through the dark hallways searching for him, and when she gets to the main room, she sees that the front door is wide open. She nervously goes to look inside when suddenly Wayne grabs her shoulder from behind and asks her what's going on. She explains that she can't find RJ, but Wayne points out that the van is still in the driveway, so the two of them split up to search for him. Lorraine heads up towards the van, but just before she gets there, Howard turns on the light and steps out onto the porch, saying that he can't find his wife, and asking the girl to come inside and help him look. As he grabs a flashlight from the drawer, Howard tells her that there's another one down in the basement, and asks her to get it so that they can search for Pearl together. Reluctantly, she agrees, and descends down into the dark basement, but that was her biggest mistake. Looking around, she eventually finds the flashlight there by the workbench, but when she goes back upstairs, she realizes that the old man has locked the door from the other side, trapping her in. Terrified, the girl starts yelling and slamming on the door for someone to open it up, but nobody comes. With nowhere else to go, she heads back down the stairs, shining her light around as she looks for another route. That's when she discovers the dead body of a man who isn't from their group hanging up against the wall, and she screams as the reality that she's stuck in a murder house sinks in. Okay, wow. This is an impressive level of stupid. If you're going to end up being held hostage by a guy who was born when the dinosaurs still walked the earth, then you should at least make him work for it. These bozos didn't last 2 seconds into their search before they broke the survival rule number 1, which is never split up. Because without friends around, then you've got no one to use as a meat shield when things start to go horribly wrong. As a matter of fact, I would have woken up everyone else in the cabin to come help us look too, considering that RJ deciding to run off was pretty much all of their faults. With Jackson, Maxine, and Bobby Lynn involved too, then they could have divided into 2 groups like the gang from Scooby-Doo, giving them the option to cover more ground, while also maintaining the safety of not being alone. The worst part is that Lorraine made it within 15 feet of her boyfriend's dead body before being caught by the old man. The van was clearly moved at least a few yards from the place where they parked it originally, so this should have been a red flag that someone had been messing with it. And if she'd just taken a few more steps to investigate, she would have seen what happened to her man, and been able to sprint back to the cabin and wake up the others so that they could come up with a plan to fight back, instead of giving the old creeps the chance to pick them off one at a time. Now, once she was inside and Howard told her to go grab the flashlight from the basement, the answer to that should have obviously been a firm no, at the very least. She should have checked to make sure that there weren't locks on the outside of the doorway that he could easily use to trap her in as soon as she let her guard down. Now that she's trapped, the most important thing to do is search the basement for some tools like a hammer, an axe, or anything else heavy and swingable. Not only could she use it to break through the door, but then she'd also have a weapon to defend herself with if Pops decided to get confrontational. The door looks pretty easy to get through, but it's important to remember that doing so is going to make a lot of noise, so it might be wise to stay calm and wait until she was sure that the old timer was out of the house again before she got to work. Alternatively, she could start off by seeing if there's a window or another exit that she might be able to break out of without making as much of a commotion instead. Also, she might be trapped, but she does have the benefit of the basement being in an easily defensible position. If she thinks quickly, Lorraine might be able to booby trap the stairs and prepare for a fight, hiding in the shadows and waiting to ambush Howard the next time that he came down the stairs. He shouldn't be too much trouble to fight as long as she can get the jump on him. And personally, I wouldn't hesitate to put the beat down on an old man if it was what I had to do to survive. Meanwhile, back outside, Wayne decides to search the barn looking for RJ, but accidentally steps right on a nail sticking up through a board on the ground. Falling over in pain, he uses a hanging light to get a better look before pulling the nail out of his foot, and slowly gets to his feet, calling for help from anyone who might be nearby. Just then, he notices a shadow pass by the barn door. Thinking that it must be RJ or Lorraine, he limps over to the door and crouches down to peek through a small hole, when suddenly, Pearl jams a pitchfork through it directly into his eyeball, killing him in the blink of an eye. After a moment, the woman comes shuffling into the barn holding the pitchfork in her hands, stabbing him once more in the back to make sure that he's dead, before covering the body up with some hay. That makes 2 victims down, with 4 more to go. Okay, these delinquents are officially dropping like flies. Captain Underpants over here just walked right into that pitch dark barn without even considering for a second that there might be an ambush waiting for him inside. It's common sense to not go walking around barefoot when you can't see what you're stepping on, and definitely don't lean down and put your eye straight up to a hole in the wall when you're not sure what's on the other side. Oh, here's a tip. If you're ever in a position like this where you see a shadow pass by, but when you call out, they don't answer you back, then chances are high that whoever it was is not your friend. Since he had that hanging light available, Wayne should have used it to get a better look at his surroundings instead of walking right into a trap. He's in a barn, so there must be plenty of improvised weapons lying around that he could have used to defend himself as well. When your opponent is a 90-year-old fossil who can't move faster than 1 mile per hour, just about the only way that she can take you in a fight is if she has the element of surprise. So be smarter than Wayne here, and don't give her the opportunity. Back at the cabin, Jackson hears a strange noise from somewhere in the darkness and tells Bobby Lynn to go back to sleep while he gets up to check it out. While getting a drink of milk in the kitchen, he notices Howard walking across the field towards the cabin and goes outside to see what's up. The old man tells him that his wife's gone missing, explaining that she gets confused sometimes after dark. Jackson notices that he's carrying his shotgun, pointing out that it looks like a lot of firepower to go searching for an old lady, but he says that it's just in case he runs into any gators out by the swamp. Agreeing to help him look for his wife, Jackson goes back into the bedroom to put some pants on, never noticing that Pearl is actually already inside, watching him from the shadows at the end of the hall as he leaves. Once he's gone, the old woman creeps over to the room where Maxine is sleeping and stands over her in the bed, pulling back the sheets and climbing in next to her. Jackson and Howard head down to the dock and decide to split up to cover more ground. While searching through the brush, Jackson comes across a car with a Texas license plate half buried in the mud just off of the main trail. Starting to get suspicious, he notices Howard's flashlight on the other side of the water and goes to see how he's doing, but when he gets there, he finds only the light buried in the mud with no trace of the old man. Jackson climbs up out of the swamp looking back over his shoulder and jumps with fright when he nearly walks right into Howard standing there in the darkness. The man complains that seeing these young people around makes his wife want to feel young again herself. Their last visitor was the same, but he can't give her what she wants anymore, and they can't understand what it's like to grow old. Confused, Jackson says that they should head back up to the house, but the old man only raises his shotgun, blasting him point blank in the chest and sending him crashing into the water. That makes 3 victims down, with 3 more to go. Okay, of all the people who should have sensed when a sneak attack was coming, you'd think that it'd be the guy who survived 2 tours in Vietnam, right? It's not like there weren't plenty of red flags. That abandoned car out in the mud had hippie stickers all on it, so clearly it didn't belong to the old man. As soon as the old timer snuck up on him and started with that "the last person who came out here" stuff, it was probably time to wrestle that shotgun away and gain control of the situation. Jackson probably wouldn't have even had to fight him off, since any strenuous activity seems to be borderline fatal to him because of his heart condition. If he went for the shotgun before he had a chance to fire, then the old man might have just keeled over right there on the spot and saved Jackson the trouble of having to take him out himself. So far, everyone's deaths could have been easily avoided if they hadn't underestimated Howard and his wife. It's only the girls left now, and hopefully they can salvage the situation before they all end up dead. Hearing the commotion outside, Maxine rolls over and realizes that the old woman is laying next to her in bed. Horrified, she screams at the top of her lungs, and Bobby Lynn comes running to see what's going on, almost crashing into Pearl on her way down the hall. Meanwhile, Lorraine starts searching around the basement for some tools, eventually finding a hatchet and using it to chop a hole through the door at the top of the stairs. Reaching for the lock, she's just about to set herself free when suddenly Howard shows up and crushes her hand with the butt end of his shotgun, nearly chopping off her fingers. The girl yells out for help, but he tells her that she's only going to make things worse for herself, pointing the weapon at her and ordering her to get back down into the basement and stay quiet before turning on the TV to drown out the sounds of her screams. Taking matters into her own hands, furious. Bobby Lynn decides to go looking for the men down by the swamp, only to find Pearl standing there in the nude on the edge of the dock. Still unaware that she's in danger, the girl runs over and tries to help her out, wrapping a blanket around the old woman's shoulders and asking her if she's alright. Suddenly, the woman reaches back and slaps her hard across the face, insulting her and blocking her path back to shore. Furious, Bobby Lynn gets right in her grill and shouts at her to move out of the way, but that's when the woman shoves her into the lake, and in an instant, an enormous alligator bursts out of the darkness, grabbing her by the head and dragging her beneath the surface as the water turns red with blood. That makes 4 victims down, with 2 more to go. Back at the cabin, Maxine washes herself off and notices that everyone else has gone missing. Just then, she hears Howard and Pearl coming up towards the house from the swamp, and ducks back into the shadows just as they come inside to get her. Searching around the cabin, the 2 old-timers can't seem to find her. Howard mentions that he's got a different girl up at the house, but Pearl says that she wants Maxine, because she has something special about her, like the old woman did when she was younger. Sitting down on the bed, she complains that she's tired of never getting what she wants, and asks her husband to make her feel young again. He says that he's worried that his heart won't be able to handle it, but finally he gives in, and they start to make some nasty old people love, never noticing that Maxine is hiding right beneath the bed the entire time. Okay, well, it's pretty gross, but if there was ever a time to fight back, this would be it. The old folks are clearly distracted and disarmed, so you aren't gonna get a better chance to catch them with their pants down, literally, than right here and now. Maxine may not know exactly what happened to her friends yet, but she does know for sure that whatever Howard and Pearl are up to, they definitely don't have good intentions. So at this point, she has to do whatever it takes to survive. She's got a clear path straight to the old man's shotgun, and in the position that they're in, one good blast would put both of those psychos in the dirt. There's no way that they could possibly get up in time to stop her, and even if it turns out to be empty, she could still use it as a club to slap them around, like we mentioned before. Howard here would probably have a heart attack at the first sign of a struggle, which would leave only Pearl to contend with, and she looks like she'd get blown over by a strong gust of wind. If it were me, I'd grab that shotgun and end this nightmare right here, because it'd be much easier to deal with the threat now than spare their lives and give them the chance to get the jump on you later. While the 2 old-timers are good and distracted, Maxine seizes the opportunity to crawl out of the room and run for her life. She tries the van first, but finds that they've already stashed the tires and stolen the keys. A few feet away, she notices RJ's corpse lying there in the dirt, and hears Lorraine screaming for help from inside of the house. So she grabs Wayne's revolver out of the glove box and runs inside. Searching the place, she finds Lorraine still trapped in the basement and quickly sets her free, telling her to keep her voice down so that the old people won't come back before they can escape. Maxine says that they need to find the keys to their truck and get out of there, but Lorraine is hysterical and won't listen. Shouting that it's all their fault, she runs for the front door, only to immediately get smoked by Howard's shotgun the instant that she steps outside. That makes 5 victims down, with 1 more to go. Okay, that's gonna leave a mark. Just when it looked like she was about to be home free, Lorraine here still found a way to get herself killed. I think we all know where this is going. Lorraine, you f***ed up. Oh god, where do I even begin? We've already covered how going down into a creepy grandpa's basement without making damn sure that you'd be able to get back out wasn't exactly the brightest move. So, after falling for one of the oldest tricks in the book, you might think that you'd take a good look at how you ended up in this situation, and started making smarter decisions from that point on, but that's just not your style, is it? Even when you had a genuinely good idea, like finding that axe to chop your way out, somehow you still managed to screw everything up. Next time, it might help to make the hole on the side of the door that's actually close to the locks. That way you wouldn't have to reach all the way across and expose yourself to a counterattack. I mean, seriously, you could clearly see what side the handle was on from your end, so I'm struggling to understand how the hell you blew it so badly here. Getting your fingers crushed definitely looks like it hurts, and I don't blame you for needing a minute to collect yourself before making another escape attempt. But right after he attacked, the old man just up and left to go after your friends, so there was no reason why you should have sat there crying for the next 15 minutes. Instead of, you know, just reaching out again and opening the door as soon as he was gone. Hello? Are you really just going to let that hard work go to waste and sit there helplessly waiting for him to come back? That's just embarrassing. Well, lucky for you, Maxine had some better survival skills and came along to set you free. This is the part where you shut up and listen to what she says so that you can both make it out alive, right? Wrong. Instead, let's sprint out through the front door screaming and drawing all kinds of attention and run right into a wall of lead. Great strategy. I can't believe that it didn't work out for you. Out of everyone who's been killed so far, you definitely had the most opportunities to escape, but somehow managed to drop the ball every single time. When you're so bad at survival that you wind up dead, inches from the finish line, even after your friends did all the work for you, Lorraine, you up. Maxine ducks around the corner, hiding as she listens to the old people say that they're going to bring the bodies inside so that it looks like self-defense, and feed them to the gators out in the lake after a day if nobody comes looking. The couple drags Lorraine's mangled corpse inside, but suddenly the girl gasps, shocking Howard so badly that he starts to have a heart attack. The man collapses to the floor, and that's when Maxine comes around the corner brandishing her gun and demanding that Pearl hand over the keys to their truck, which she says are in the kitchen. As she comes back from grabbing them, the old woman stands up to confront her, but when Maxine tries to fire the revolver, she sees that it was never loaded. Okay, this is not exactly ideal, but Maxine's come too far to blow it now. Note to self, always make sure that the gun is loaded before you actually need it. Now, her best option here is to just go straight for the shotgun, since it's pretty much the only way that the old lady can put up a fight without the element of surprise. Whatever you do not want to let her get it first. Just thinking ahead a little bit right now, it could actually be helpful to leave Pearl alive if she can. That way, her story would be more believable once the police get involved. But right now, the most important thing here is to do whatever it takes to survive. The good news is, she's old and slow, so it should be no trouble for Maxine to dive over there and either get the gun or knock Granny out before it's too late. Pearl goes for her husband's shotgun and shoots at her, but Maxine dodges out of the way just in time, and the blast is so powerful that it sends the old woman flying out through the front door, shattering her hip from the fall. With both threats eliminated, Maxine walks out of the house and over to the old woman, who starts begging her for help. Instead, she raises a finger to her lips and tells Pearl to be quiet, climbing into the truck, throwing it in reverse, and driving straight over her head, before speeding off towards the highway as the sun starts to rise. That makes 5 victims and 2 insane senior citizens down, with 1 survivor left standing. The next day, the sheriff and his deputies arrive to look over the crime scene and watch as the coroner loads the bodies into the car. One of the officers finds RJ's camera inside the cabin, asking him what he thinks is on it, and the sheriff responds that, by the look of this place, it must be some kind of messed up horror film. They say that getting into the movie business is hard, and let me tell you, Maxine here knows all about it, in more ways than one. She wants to be a movie star more than anything in the world, and doesn't care whose balls she has to step on to do it. But Maxine isn't the only killer in Hollywood, and when the secrets of her past start to threaten her future, she's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they stay buried. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the movie star killer in Maxine. This woman's biggest dreams are about to turn into her worst nightmare. Arriving on set at a Hollywood studio, aspiring actress Maxine Minx confidently walks in and takes a seat in front of the casting panel. She's auditioning for the lead role in an upcoming horror movie, hoping for a chance to get out of the adult entertainment business and become an official big screen movie star. After finishing up the audition, she leaves feeling like she absolutely nailed it, bragging to the other girls before hopping in her convertible and speeding out of the parking lot to go do her real job. While she's putting on her makeup, her co-worker Amber invites Maxine to a party at a house in the Hollywood Hills, but she turns down the offer, saying that she has to work. Back at her apartment, she gets a call from her agent, and he's got some good news. She finally got the part. Excited, she immediately runs downstairs to tell her best friend Leon, who works at a video store on the first floor of her building, and they decide to celebrate with some pizza later that night. Maxine's next stop is a club where she works as a dancer. After her shift, she meets up with her coworker Tabby, who's afraid to walk home alone because there is a serial killer on the loose. While she's grabbing a taxi, crazy. She invites Maxine along to that same party in the hills, but she decides to stay in, saying how she has to get a good night's rest before her first day on the set. Walking home, she takes a shortcut through a foggy alleyway, never noticing that there's a man quietly stalking her from a distance. When she reaches the other end, she's surprised to find that the usually open gate has already been padlocked shut. Turning around, that's when she finally notices the man standing in her path, and he pulls a switchblade out of his pocket as he starts walking after her. But that was his biggest mistake. Okay, well, Maxine may not be an official movie star just yet, but at least she's finally got her first stalker. Seriously though, something tells me that this guy isn't looking for an autograph, and Maxine here needs to act fast before her entire career ends up on the cutting room floor, literally. Earlier, her friend mentioned that there's a dangerous criminal on the loose, a real-life serial killer called the Night Stalker who terrorized Los Angeles back in the 1980s. That's why she had the right idea not to be walking around alone, and Maxine here should have been doing the same thing. Using the buddy system makes you a lot more difficult to target than when you're on your own, and it always helps to have a good meat shield nearby if you need to make a quick escape. Since she was only going one block over anyway, I would have taken the long way around instead of cutting through the obvious murder alley. That way she'd be able to stay in well-lit areas with crowds of other people, and in full view of the police, instead of being caught in a place where nobody could see her if she gets in trouble. With that being said, if you're gonna cut through the alley of death, then you should at least take a quick glance over your shoulder to make sure that you aren't being followed. Carrying some self-defense tools never hurts either, and trust me, we'll get back to that idea in just a minute. If we make it out of this alive, then the first thing that Maxine here needs to do is hire a giant security guard to walk around her at all times, like a modern-day kick streamer. Not only would this keep her safe, but it would also make her seem more important, subconsciously priming people to see her as a famous movie star even before she gets her first red carpet premiere. Now, from the way that this guy is acting, this seems like more than just your average robbery, and he's got a knife, which makes fighting back against him incredibly dangerous. This means that we need to be extremely careful about what we choose to do next. If he was looking just to separate her from her V-Bucks, then it would probably be safer to just cooperate for now. But since he's obviously after more than just her money, Maxine is going to have to fight. The first thing that she should do here is start screaming as loud as she can to attract as much attention as possible, which might cause him to run. Then we need to look around the alley and use anything available to us as tools to make our escape. If she moves quickly, she can use the trash cans as a barrier between her and the attacker. The lids could be used as shields or to throw that like Captain America and knock his stupid little hat right off his head. The key is to keep your distance and only get into a direct fight with him if it's absolutely necessary, aiming for weak points like his eyes, fingers, and balls to get him away. If she can stun him, then she can run back out the way that she came and go back to her job where they have a security guard who can deal with this guy. But of course, this is Maxine that we're talking about, and you're about to see why this was a bad idea for Buster here in just a second. Maxine turns back to the gate, desperately trying to get it open, but just when the man gets a little too close, she whips around and pulls out a pistol, telling him to put his hands up. He immediately drops the knife, but he's about to find out that he messed with the wrong actress. Instead of letting him go, Maxine orders the man to take off all of his clothes, and makes him do things with the weapon that you'd only see in one of her other movies. When she's done, she forces the creep to lie down on the ground before stomping straight on his nuts with her high-heeled boot, making sure that he'll never mess with anyone ever again. Back at her apartment, Maxine falls asleep watching movies with Leon until she's abruptly woken up by a series of knocks at the front door. Answering it, she's too late to catch the mysterious visitor going down in the elevator, but finds a strange package on the floor that they left behind. It's a VHS tape labeled "For Maxine," and she's surprised to see that it's actually footage from the movie that she and her friends were recording before the massacre back at the farm in Texas. Embarrassed, Maxine locks herself in her bedroom, so Leon decides to head home alone, having no idea that he's being watched by a man in a car from across the street. Meanwhile, at the house in the hills, Amber and Tabby are just finding out that the party was really a death trap all along. Filming them, a group of men go to a bedroom closet where they have the girls tied up and drag Tabby over to a large green door. Suddenly, a man wearing black leather gloves comes out and attacks her, but this is only the first part of his evil plan. In the morning, Maxine heads to an art studio for her first day working on the film. They need to make a mold of her head for the final scene, so her job is to just sit there and wait for it to dry. But while she's left alone with her thoughts, she starts having visions of the old woman from the farm. The more that she starts to panic, the worse that it gets, until she finally crashes down backwards into the floor, clawing away at the wax that's covering her mouth just to get some air. Across town, two LAPD detectives, Williams and Torres, are called to a crime scene at a cemetery, where two bodies were just discovered floating in the duck pond. It's Amber and Tabby, looking like they've been dead for several hours, with demonic symbols burned into both their skin. That makes 2 victims down, with 6 more to go. And the coroner thinks that it might be related to the serial killer case, but the detectives aren't so sure. Frustrated, Maxine goes out to her car for a break, where a worker comes to give her the filming schedule. He mentions that the director wants to meet her later that day, warning her that the woman can be a pretty scary person. As she's getting ready to leave, she notices a mysterious note tucked under her windshield wiper. It's somebody's phone number with a message telling her to call for a good time. But when she unfolds the sheet, she realizes that it's written on her yearbook picture from when she was still in school. Rushing to the phone, she dials the number to find out what this mystery stalker wants, and the man reveals that he knows her real last name. Not only that, but he knows what happened at the farm back in Texas, and tells her to meet him at a restaurant in 1 hour or else. Okay. It looks like somebody found out about Maxine's dirty laundry, and this just made her long-awaited rise to stardom a lot more complicated. She can't make it to the big screen if she's doing time for taking out that crazy old lady back in Texas. So how do we get rid of this creep before he causes any more trouble? Well, first off, what we're definitely not going to do is meet up with the blackmailer one-on-one. If they could actually prove anything and only want to see Maxine answer for her crimes, then they would have told the police already. Their shady tactics make it obvious that they have bad intentions, and at the same time, they clearly need Maxine to cooperate for some aspect of their plan. So why make it easy for them? Instead, the first thing that I would do is tell a trusted friend like her buddy Leon. She can fill him in on the details in case anything goes wrong, and he can even come to the meetup with her as a backup. He'll have to stay out of sight and not raise any suspicion from the blackmailer, but having a lookout will be a huge help if this guy tries anything else shady. Of course, carrying something for self-defense would also be a good idea, but we already know that Maxine keeps that thing on her wherever she goes, so she doesn't need any help when it comes to the blicky. Knowing the exact time and place of the meeting gives Maxine the option to flip the script on the stalker and turn it into a trap for him instead. What she needs to do is get some of her friends to wait for her outside of the hotel. Then, after hearing what the blackmailer has to say, they can jump him when he goes to leave and find out who he's really working for, or pull an Uno reverse and start tailing him instead. She can't tell the police for obvious reasons, but one thing that she could do is plant some illegal substances on the guy, and then call in an anonymous tip to get him arrested, which should at least get him out of her way for now. Figuring out the ID of the blackmailer could change everything, but they've been careful not to give us much evidence to work with yet. Still, based on what was on the tape and the fact that they knew where to find her, it's obvious that the stalker has known her personally for many years. So she should think back to anyone who might possibly have access to this information and start building a list of suspects from there. The 2 dead victims that were just found could be a good place to start, since they were both close friends of Maxine's, indicating that the killings and the blackmail could be connected. She obviously wouldn't be able to review the evidence herself, but I'd pay attention to the news once more details start to come out and see if there's anything that sticks out that might point us in the right direction. In the meantime, anyone who's close to Maxine, like Leon and her agent, should be on high alert in case the killer decides to target them next. This can actually work to their advantage if Leon was willing to use himself as live bait, since they might be able to lure the attacker out and catch them in the act. With no other choice, Maxine travels to the restaurant on the top floor of this swanky hotel where she meets with the mystery man, who introduces himself as John Labatt, a private investigator. He won't reveal who hired him, but he knows the names of everyone who died at the farm, and he knows that she was the one who killed the older couple. Without admitting to anything, Maxine doubts that he has any proof, but he tells her that she might be surprised. She tries to pay him off, but he says that money isn't what they're after. Instead, he wants her to come to a party later that night, giving her an envelope with the address, and threatening to use his inside information to end her career if she doesn't play along. When Maxine gets back to her apartment, she's immediately confronted by the two detectives before she can get inside. They say that she's not in any trouble, but they're looking to chat about the two dead girls after learning that she knew both victims personally, and was one of the last people to see the two of them alive. The news hits her hard, but she quickly composes herself and chooses to stay quiet, slamming the door right in the detectives' faces. Upstairs, she watches through the window to make sure that they're gone before grabbing the tape and bringing it down to see Leon. Handing him the tape, she asks if there's any way to find out who recorded it. After looking it over, he unfortunately says that it's not possible, but he does notice that it's made by a rare brand, Quantity, saying that he can call around to find out who in the area is selling them. Thanking him, Maxine hurries to get back to the studio, with no idea that she'll never see him alive again. At the studio, she passes through a security gate, and the guard there already recognizes her from her other movies. Waiting in the backlot, she notices a group of protesters demonstrating against the film, but that's when the director Elizabeth picks her up for a chat. As they're driving through the sets, the director explains how she's been getting pushback for casting Maxine in the role, with the producers worried that she'll be too controversial. For her, she saw a realness in Maxine's acting that made her stand out, but she still isn't sure if she really has what it takes. Eventually, they arrive outside of the set of the Bates Motel from Psycho, but Maxine seems more interested in the old haunted house on the hill behind it. While Elizabeth is still talking to her, she stares up at the building, convinced that she can see the old woman watching her from the window, and completely ignoring everything the director is saying. Calling her out, the director snaps her out of it, and when she looks back, the old woman has already disappeared. But it's clear that the ghosts of Maxine's past are still haunting her. The director picks up on this and reminds her not to get distracted, warning her not to blow what might be her only chance at ever becoming a real star. While she's driving home, Maxine notices the private eye trailing her in traffic and decides that she's just about had enough. Throwing the car in park, she wraps her keys around her fingers and storms up to the car, smashing his camera on the street and proceeding to beat the absolute hell out of him before kicking off his side view mirror and speeding away. Okay, holy this guy is annoying. I know that beatdown felt good as hell, but Maxine needs to be careful here before she ends up catching another case. Instead of going full Wolverine on his ass in broad daylight, this is exactly why she should have hired a full-time security guard by now. That way, she could have somebody else take care of the guy without having to get her own hands dirty, since she's already in enough trouble as it is. As long as we're bringing other people into this, I'd also hire my own private investigator to stalk the stalker and turn this into a two-player game. I'm sure he wouldn't exactly like being on the receiving end of things for once, and digging up some dirt on him could help turn the tables. Or how about this idea? Maxine pulls a Nathan for you and hires 10 other women who look just like her to start running around the city, throwing him off when he can't figure out which version of her to follow. Along the same lines of making herself harder to track, she should do anything that she can to change up her routine. For now, I'd rent a different car, start taking different routes to and from work, and even stay at different hotels or at a friend's place until she can finally shake this guy. Since the private eye is so focused on following her every move, she could try to swing this into luring him into a trap. By setting up a scenario where he has to do something illegal, like breaking and entering, she can get him arrested by the police and see how he likes trying to follow her around from inside of a cell. Of course, there's always the option to call in some help from her criminal contacts to get rid of him the old-fashioned way. I mean, she's taken people out for messing with her career before, so violence is definitely on the table here, but we'll come back to this idea a little later. Just like before, learning the blackmailer's real identity would change everything. And now she's got some new evidence evidence that could help her figure it out. First off, she has the envelope with the exact address telling her where to find them. Knowing the meeting spot gives her the option to stake out the location and see if she can catch a glimpse of the blackmailer somewhere around the property. She can also look into the ownership history of the house and start to build out some connections from there. If she does go to the meeting, then I wouldn't go alone. Once again, I'd get as many friends together as I could and go for the Trojan horse approach. So Maxine would go to the meeting spot, gets the blackmailer to reveal himself, and then boom, her trunk opens up with 5 of her heavily armed friends to make him regret ever crossing this future Scream Queen. We also have 2 more pieces of physical evidence: the tape and the newspaper clipping. From the clipping, if we can find out what newspaper it came from, this could provide us with a lot of helpful information, like when it was printed and where it was sold, which could help us narrow down a list of potential suspects. As for the tape, Leon's plan to call around to local stores in the area is actually a great idea. Like he already mentioned, the brand of tape that was used, Quantity, are rare, higher quality tapes that are used in professional filmmaking. They make up only 5 to 10% of all the tapes that are out there and are only sold at specialty stores. On top of that, this one looks brand new, possibly indicating that it was purchased recently. The actual footage on the tape is a duplicate from evidence gathered by the Texas Sheriff's Department. To make a copy, the blackmailer would have needed to buy not only the tapes, but a playback VCR and a recording VCR, and RCA cables to connect the 2 devices. Now that we have his grocery list, if we can call around and find a store that just sold all of these items to a particularly shady character, then we'll be one step closer to cracking the case. Before heading home, Maxine decides that she needs to talk to somebody about what's been going on, and the only person besides Leon who she can trust is her agent, Teddy. Rushing to his office, she finally confesses the full rundown of what happened at the farm. But Teddy here isn't as surprised as you might think. Taking it all in, he tells her to focus on her acting and let him handle everything else, saying that he'll do whatever it takes to make sure that she gets her big break. Back at her apartment, Maxine climbs into bed and starts reading through the script, but she's keeping the blicky on her nightstand just in case of any unwanted visitors. Meanwhile, downstairs, Leon is working late when a customer comes in asking for something that makes him upset. After showing him out, Leon decides to close up for the night, but he has no idea that he's not really alone. Behind him, the man dressed in black leather quietly grabs a hunting knife from the counter before sneaking up on him and using it to slice the back of his neck open. But he's not done yet. He blocks one strike with his cast and tries to crawl away, but the man quickly catches up and digs the blade into his back. That makes 3 victims down, with 5 more to go. And as the man leaves, he takes off one of Leon's earrings as a trophy. Outside, he climbs into the back seat of the private investigator's car, and his assistant seems like he's getting more and more afraid of him the deeper into the plan that they get. In the morning, Maxine wakes up to a phone call from Teddy. He's been doing some research into the man who's been following her, but so far, it's turned up nothing but dead ends. While they're talking, she notices a bunch of cop cars and ambulances gathered outside and rushes downstairs to see what's happened. She's devastated to see that they're here for Leon, with the same demonic symbol carved into his forehead as they found on the last 2 victims. This time, the detectives are finally able to get her down to the station for questioning. Bringing her to the morgue, they show her the bodies of her 2 other friends, saying how all 3 killings must be related. They think that their suspect is setting things up to make the attacks look like the work of another serial killer, but they haven't made any progress in the investigation yet. And the one thing that all 3 victims have in common is that they all knew Maxine. Detective Torres tries to pressure her into spilling the beans before she ends up dead next, but Maxine still refuses to talk, telling them that she has to get to work as she storms out of the room. Williams chases behind her, begging Maxine just to tell them anything that might help save the next victim. But she responds that sometimes you can only save yourself. After leaving the station, Maxine finally gets back to the studio, where they're filming some flashback scenes with Molly, the main actress from the first film. The director tells them to spend some time together, intending for Maxine to pick up on a few tricks of the trade from someone with a little more experience. At her trailer, the girl explains that getting on Elizabeth's good side can make or break your entire career, telling Maxine to keep her head down and follow her instructions without asking any questions if she wants to make it. As they part ways, she mentions how she has to get ready for a party in the hills later that night, and Maxine leaves without realizing that the girl is walking straight into another trap. And that's when something stops her dead in her tracks. Standing in her path is her nemesis, the private investigator, and he reveals that he's carrying a revolver, telling Maxine to come with him quietly before she causes any more trouble. Okay, it looks like we've got ourselves an Old West standoff, and Labat here may not have as much power in this situation as he thinks. We already know that he isn't going to shoot her because his employer needs Maxine alive for whatever little plan that they have cooked up. She's about to make a break for it, which means that we're in for a good old-fashioned foot pursuit. And he made a big mistake by coming after our girl Maxine on her home turf. Once the chase begins, we just don't want to run down the open street where he can easily see us. From there, we can strategically escape through the sets in a way that makes it as difficult as possible for him to keep track of where we are. We need to use the complicated layout of the backlots to our advantage, by making sharp turns, doubling back, or changing elevation levels whenever we can. The sets are also full of environmental hazards that she can use to create obstacles like knocking over objects in his path as she runs by, or running through a doorway and then blocking it off with a heavy item to slow him down. Grabbing a weapon is always a good idea, and even if it's only something like a simple 2x4, she can still use it to knock him out by surprise if she sets up an ambush. Being on a film set also prepares us with some unique opportunities. For example, if she happens to run through the wardrobe department, she can quickly change her look by throwing on a costume or a wig to throw him off. Since the place is so spread out, the workers need to use all kinds of vehicles to get around. So I'd be looking for a golf cart or even a horse that I could use to make a quick escape. Remember, Maxine here is literally the movie star, and there are hundreds of people working here whose only goal is to make sure that the movie comes out. One option could be to quickly circle back to Molly's trailer and hide out there, where she can then call for more help from studio security. Her ultimate goal should be to get to where there's other crew members working and use them as meat shields to keep her safe. But with that being said, if this guy happened to have an unfortunate accident while chasing her, like falling down a flight of stairs or out of a window, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for Maxine either. Backing away, Maxine does a 180 and takes off running up the street. Cutting through one of the sets, she ends up in a fake corner store where the front door is locked, giving Labat a chance to catch up. He tackles her into a bunch of piñatas, but she gets to her feet first and escapes through the side entrance. Maxine runs into another facade and out through the park in the front of a town hall, until she finally makes it into the haunted house set that's behind the motel. She hurries inside, but it's a dead end, leaving her with nowhere else to run. Knowing that he's got her, Labat draws his weapon and slowly approaches the door, but luckily, he's intercepted by a security guard just in time. Not wanting to cause a scene, the man plays it off like he just got lost and lets the guard lead him away, leaving Maxine with an opportunity to escape. As she's leaving the lot, the director calls her over, telling her to take the weekend off so she'll have plenty of rest for her first big day. Besides that, she wants her to take care of whatever's going on in her life at all costs, so that they can finish the production without any distractions, and Maxine says that's exactly what she plans to do. Back at her apartment, Maxine comes up with a plan to turn the tables on her stalkers. Calling her agent and her friend Shepard, she tells them to meet her at a particular club later that night. With everything in motion, she heads to the club and starts to blend in with the crowd. Sure enough, Labat shows up there looking for her, and she makes sure that he sees her before disappearing into the bathroom, all according to her plan. Thinking that he's got her cornered, Labat storms in and starts kicking open the stalls one after the other, shouting about what a badass he is the entire time. Finally, he gets to the last stall, fully expecting to find Maxine inside, only to realize that she's escaped through an open window. Running out the back door, he's suddenly blinded by a set of high beams when he reaches the loading dock. It's Maxine and her agent Teddy, and while he's focused on them, Shepard sneaks up from behind and clubs the man with a baseball bat, knocking him out cold. When Labat finally wakes up, he discovers that he's been handcuffed to the steering wheel of his own car. He sees Maxine standing nearby, and when she presses a button, he suddenly realizes that he's been placed into a junkyard car crusher, and it's slowly coming down on his head. Standing back, they watch as the machine brutally crushes the man to death, flattening him out like a pancake. That makes 4 down with 4 more to go, and Teddy tells her to get cleaned up while they take care of the rest, sending Shepard's Dobermans to lick up his blood off the ground. Back at home, Maxine hits the showers to clean herself up, but she can't shake the feeling that this fight isn't really over. Turning on the news, she sees a report about how the serial killer has claimed another victim. And this reminds her of the conversation that she had with Detective Williams back at the station. Realizing that she needs to do something, she goes to the trash can and digs out the envelope that Labat gave her, suddenly putting the pieces together that all of her friends said they were heading to a party in the hills before they went missing. Rushing out to her car, she decides that she's going to investigate the address for herself, but what she doesn't realize is that the detectives are also right behind her. Okay, now that's what we like to see. The car crusher has got to be one of the most gangster ways to take somebody out. And if one thing's for sure, it's the best decision Maxine here ever made was calling in some help from our boy Gus Fring. You know who didn't make good decisions? I'll give you 2 hints. His name rhymes with La Splat, and he just got about 5.5 feet shorter. That's right, Inspector Asshole. You, sir, have f***ed up. As a private eye, it's literally your job to know everything about your target. I guess you somehow missed the fact that Maxine here was definitely not the one to play with. That whole incident at the farm that you kept bringing up, 7 people ended up dead, but Maxine walked away as the only survivor. Did you think that this was some kind of accident? This woman is so determined to be a movie star that she already survived a Texas Chainsaw Massacre level event in real life. And you thought that she'd be intimidated by your sorry old toothpick chewing fedora hat wearing ass. Seriously? Get real, man. The only reason why you even survived for this long is because killing you wasn't worth the trouble yet. Now, I don't know how these investigations usually go, but I'm pretty sure real detectives don't just announce, "Here I am," and then proceed to follow her every move from approximately 5 feet away. Maybe if you'd kept a lower profile, then it would have been harder for her to figure out who she needed to kill. But you were over here practically daring her to try something every chance that you got. And what do you know? She finally did something about it. Wow, it's almost like our actions have consequences. Sorry, dude, but have fun being the only Autobot in hell, because Inspector Labat, you have seriously f***ed up. The address leads her to a remote property way up in the hills. Parking her car, she has to take a gondola ride to get to the house itself, with the detectives watching her every move to see where she's going. Arriving at the top, she steps out into the empty front yard with no sign of anyone else being there. The front door is unlocked, so she carefully sneaks inside, making her way past piles of recording equipment. Just then, she hears a noise from somewhere upstairs and slowly creeps up the spiral staircase, until she finds herself in front of a large green door. From the other side, she can hear a tape playing of herself as a young girl, in a video that she recorded with her father many years before she disappeared. Pushing it open, she finds a man sitting in front of a makeup mirror. And that's when she finally learns that the blackmailer has been her father Ernest all along. The man is thrilled to have finally tracked her down, but Maxine herself is too stunned to move, as he calmly reaches down and takes the weapon right out of her hands. This time, he's the one who's making a movie, and it's meant to show how the dreams of being a Hollywood star corrupted his once innocent little daughter. And he's going to use her story to prove his point. Speechless, Maxine backs away until she's standing at the top of the stairs, and ends up knocking over a suitcase that's filled with the cut-up body parts of the actress Molly, making 5 victims down with 3 more to go. In fact, she's so terrified by the sight that she doesn't notice her father slipping a plastic bag over her head before it's too late, causing her to slowly black out. Okay, well, how's that for one up family reunion? I guess we finally get to meet the old man, and he's just as creepy as I always feared. But I gotta say, Maxine didn't do herself any favors on this one. Getting tricked into a trap is one thing, but walking right into one when you already know it's a trap is a completely different story. Besides saving Molly, there was absolutely no need for Maxine to rush into this alone. She had the guy's exact address, so why not call in some backup to help her out at least? We bring in the heavy artillery to take care of Labat, then we decide to go in by ourselves to face the head bad guy? That's just a bad strategy on her part. Seeing the old man for the first time in however many years definitely came as a shock, but that shock should have worn off right the exact millisecond when he was shoving a plastic bag over the top of her head. If this ever happens to you, then the first thing that you need to do is tear a hole in the bag using your fingernails or teeth, allowing more oxygen to get inside. Once you've saved yourself from suffocating, then we can focus on our attacker, hitting him with kicks, elbows, and headbutts until he finally loses his grip and you're able to escape. Unfortunately for Maxine, she didn't react quickly enough, and now we'll have to see what kind of situation she's in when she eventually wakes up. Sometime later, Maxine wakes up to find that she's been blindfolded and tied to a palm tree in front of the house's pool, with studio lights and movie cameras all focused on her at the center of the scene. That's when her father slowly walks into the crowd and makes his way up to the platform where Maxine is standing. Taking off her blindfold, she explains that her friends needed to be punished for their sins. As for Maxine, he's going to make an example out of her by performing an exorcism live on camera, driving out the evil spirits that have been corrupting her since she started her career in Hollywood. Turning on the camera, he begins to recite from the Bible, declaring that everyone in the movie business is actually working as a servant of the devil. With Maxine powerless to fight back, he orders her to confess her sins and let her spirit be free. Otherwise, she'll be branded with the same smearing hot iron that he used on all of her friends. Furious, he inches the iron closer and closer to her head, when all of a sudden, Detective Torres busts out of the shadows, ordering everyone to freeze. Instead, one of the men pulls a sawed-off shotgun out of his robe, but he's immediately shot by Detective Williams and tumbles forward into the pool. The others all put their hands up, but the preacher refuses to surrender, firing them all up to the fight to the death. Suddenly, all hell breaks loose as the situation escalates into a full-blown gunfight. The preacher takes one to the shoulder, causing him to drop the iron and setting his robe on fire, but he drops down into the water to extinguish the flames. The detectives take cover behind a low stone wall, dropping as many of the cultists as they can while the preacher escapes deeper into the property. Maxine is still caught in the crossfire, but that's when she remembers that she has a switchblade in her pocket, managing to cut herself free as the bullets ricochet all around her. Before she can get far, she's dragged down beneath the water by one of the injured cultists, but she fights him off and stabs him up through the nose with her knife, killing him instantly. With most of the cultists down, the detectives go to chase after the preacher, telling Maxine to wait for backup, but she isn't about to sit this one out, and grabs the sawed-off before chasing them up the hill towards the Hollywood sign. By the time that she makes it to the top of the hill, Maxine can already hear the sounds of a violent battle popping off not much farther up ahead, where she finds Detective Williams treating her partner's wounds. The man's been badly injured, and now that Maxine is here, Williams tells her to look after him while she goes to track down her father. She tries her best to keep him alive, but by now it's already too late, and the detective gasps for air as he dies of his injuries. Just then, she hears gunfire from somewhere in the distance. Running towards the source of the noise, she almost crashes into Detective Williams, who tumbles down the hillside. That makes 7 victims down, but now it's time for Maxine to finally confront her father. Up ahead, she finds her father lying on his back in the dirt. He's been shot by the detective and is on his way out, but not before he and his daughter get to have a few words. Through the blood in his mouth, he curses her for turning out the way that she did. A helicopter appears in the sky overhead, shining down its spotlight and telling Maxine to drop the weapon. But she's not done yet. As her father reaches out to her, she repeats the mantra that he taught her when she was a little girl. "I will not accept a life I do not deserve," before coldly raising her weapon and blowing his head apart like a watermelon, finally ending things once and for all. In the aftermath, the serial killer who's been terrorizing the city is finally caught, and Maxine gets to live out her dreams of becoming a certified Hollywood movie star. In a red carpet interview, she tells her viewers that they can do it too as long as they never give up on their goals. spinning the entire situation into a boost for her career. 1 month after the incident, production on the film begins again, with Maxine officially being recognized as the undisputed star of the show. Gathering everyone together, the director calls for a moment of silence in memory of the actress who was killed, but the show must go on. While everyone gets back to work, Maxine takes a look at the prop of her decapitated head for the end of the movie, saying how she never wants all of this to end. It's been a long journey to the top, but if she's learned one thing, it's that when people say the movie industry is cutthroat, they aren't joking around. The X trilogy. Wow. X, Pearl, Maxine. Pretty solid movies into the overall horror movie ethos, I have to say. I don't really know about the ending of this movie, but at least it's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Part 3. Let us know down in the comments what you would have done differently. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.